Deep within the heart of the dense, ominous forest, where the trees stood tall and shrouded in perpetual shadows, lay an isolated house. Its very existence was a whisper in the wilderness, known only to those who dared to venture far enough from civilization. Within the walls of this house resided our main character, a man with an enigmatic past and peculiar habits. His name was Alexander Volkov, a name that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who had heard the unsettling tales whispered around the neighboring villages. Tall and lean, with piercing blue eyes that held secrets too dark to fathom, Alexander lived a life cloaked in mystery. The house, an ancient structure passed down through generations, had once belonged to a family of hunters. But now, it stood as a relic of forgotten days, surrounded by a dense thicket of untamed vegetation. The forest itself was said to be cursed, with legends of vengeful spirits and creatures that lurked in the moonless nights. As Alexander went about his daily routines, a sense of unease began to creep over him. It was as though the very air around him had grown heavy with foreboding. The forest, once his solace and sanctuary, now felt like a cage, closing in on him with each passing day. Strange occurrences became part of his daily life. Unexplained sounds echoed through the house at odd hours, whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Shadows danced across the ancient wooden floors, taking on eerie forms that Alexander couldn't quite comprehend. And then there were the footprints, mysterious tracks that appeared overnight in the soft earth around the house, leading to nowhere and from no one. Alexander began to question his own sanity. Was the isolation driving him mad? Or were these occurrences the result of something far more sinister? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes followed his every move. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows through the trees, Alexander gathered his family, the only souls he held dear, in the dimly lit living room. His wife, Natalia, a woman of uncommon beauty with a quiet strength, sat beside him, their fingers intertwined. Their daughter, Elena, a curious and resilient young girl with her father's piercing eyes, clutched a tattered stuffed bear. Alexander recounted the strange events that had unfolded in the past weeks. His voice trembled as he spoke of the ghostly sounds, the inexplicable visions, and the eerie footprints that surrounded their home. Natalia listened in silence, her eyes filled with concern, while Elena clung to her bear, wide-eyed and trembling. That night, as the family huddled together in their shared unease, the forest outside seemed to hold its breath. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow that made the trees appear even more menacing. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it a sense of dread that sent shivers down their spines. And then, as if the very darkness itself had conspired against them, a scream pierced the night. It was a sound of pure terror, coming from within the house. Alexander bolted upright, his heart pounding in his chest. Natalia and Elena clung to each other in fear, their eyes wide with terror. Without hesitation, Alexander rushed towards the source of the scream, his footsteps echoing through the dimly lit hallway. As he reached the room from which the scream had emanated, his blood ran cold. The room was empty, the window wide open, curtains billowing in the night breeze. Elena's stuffed bear lay abandoned on the floor, its button eyes staring blankly into the abyss. But there was no sign of Elena herself. She had vanished without a trace. Panic surged through Alexander, and he called out her name, his voice echoing through the house. Natalia joined the frantic search, tears streaming down her face as they scoured every inch of the house, their desperate pleas for Elena's return falling on deaf ears. Outside, the forest seemed to close in, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The moonlight cast eerie shapes on the forest floor, and the night seemed to pulse with malevolence. Everything pointed to one terrifying possibility. An ancient evil had awoken, and it hungered for their flesh and blood. As the search for Elena continued into the darkest hours of the night, the oppressive weight of fear bore down on the family. Alexander knew, deep in his heart, that they were no longer alone in the house. The forest held its secrets, and now, it seemed, those secrets were intent on tearing his family apart. In the heart of the forest, where the line between reality and myth blurred, a lurking evil threatened to consume them all. In the eyes of Alexander Volkov, a man with an enigmatic past and an uncertain future, The dread of what lay ahead began to take root, a dread that could only be explained by the presence of a creature most feared and reviled in the darkest corners of folklore, a creature known as the vurdalak. In the wake of Elena's mysterious disappearance, Alexander Volkov was consumed by a relentless determination to unravel the enigma that had befallen his family. He knew that the lurking presence in the shadows was not a mere figment of his imagination. It was a malevolent force, and it was now his responsibility to confront it. The ancient house, once a place of solace, now seemed like a sinister labyrinth. Alexander's days were spent locked in the study, poring over dusty volumes of occult lore and deciphering cryptic texts. The walls of the room were lined with candles that cast eerie, flickering shadows on the ancient symbols and diagrams that covered the pages of his books. He began his quest by delving into the depths of local legends and folk tales, scouring the dusty archives of the nearby village. The tales were chilling, filled with accounts of vurdalaks, vampiric creatures that feasted on the blood of the living and were said to be cursed souls of the dead. As Alexander read, he couldn't shake the feeling that these stories held a grain of truth, that his family's tormentor might indeed be one of these unholy beings. But legends alone would not suffice. He needed concrete knowledge, a way to confront and defeat this ancient evil. Turning to the internet, he stumbled upon obscure forums and websites dedicated to the occult. It was there that he made contact with a group of individuals who claimed to possess knowledge of the supernatural. In the dead of night, Alexander sat hunched over his computer, typing messages to these self-proclaimed experts. His inquiries were met with skepticism, but one name kept resurfacing: a woman named Isabella Blackwood, renowned for her expertise in paranormal phenomena. She had dealt with cases that mirrored Alexander's own, and he knew he had to seek her guidance. Arranging a meeting with Isabella was not an easy task. She was elusive, and her location remained a closely guarded secret. After weeks of correspondence, she finally agreed to meet Alexander in a remote, desolate part of the forest, an area rumored to be a hotspot for supernatural activity. On the designated night, Alexander ventured into the forest, guided only by the pale glow of a waning moon. The ancient trees seemed to loom over him, whispering secrets of forgotten times. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and he could feel the weight of centuries bearing down on him. As he reached the appointed meeting spot, Isabella emerged from the shadows. She was a woman of striking beauty, her eyes filled with a profound knowledge that sent shivers down Alexander's spine. She greeted him with a nod, acknowledging the gravity of their situation. Isabella began to share her insights, recounting her own encounters with vurdalaks and the dark forces that lurked in the forest. She spoke of ancient rituals and protective amulets, of spells and incantations that could hold back the malevolent entities. But she warned Alexander that the path he had chosen was fraught with danger, that his pursuit of the vurdalak would put not only his life at risk, but the lives of those he held dear. Undeterred, Alexander pleaded with Isabella for guidance on how to track the vurdalak, to follow the elusive trail that led to his missing daughter. Isabella reluctantly agreed, providing him with a vial of enchanted herbs and a piece of parchment inscribed with a cryptic symbol, an arcane map that would lead him to the heart of the forest. With these tools in hand, Alexander returned to his cursed home, ready to embark on the treacherous journey into the depths of the forest. He knew that every step he took was fraught with danger, that the vurdalak was cunning and would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. The forest, once a sanctuary, had become a realm of uncertainty and terror. As Alexander ventured deeper into its heart, the trees closed in around him, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The map led him through winding paths and hidden clearings, each step taking him further into the unknown. The trail he followed was marked by strange symbols carved into the bark of trees, symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The air grew colder, and eerie whispers echoed through the trees. Shadows danced on the periphery of his vision, and the sense of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. As Alexander pressed on, he couldn't help but feel that he was walking a thin line between reality and madness. The forest seemed to come alive, its malevolent presence closing in on him like a tightening noose. He knew that he was drawing closer to the vurdalak, that the answers he sought lay just beyond his reach. But he also knew that he was no longer alone in this treacherous journey. Isabella's guidance, the ancient knowledge he had acquired, and the sheer determination to rescue his daughter drove him forward. He was now the hunter, the one who pursued the darkness that had descended upon his family. And so, with each step, Alexander Volkov ventured further into the heart of the forest, where the line between reality and myth blurred, and the ancient evil that had plagued his family awaited its reckoning. In the depths of the wilderness, the battle between light and darkness had begun, and only time would reveal the true nature of the vurdalak and the fate of Elena. The air in the heart of the sinister forest grew heavy with anticipation. Alexander Volkov, armed with Isabella's guidance and the determination to rescue his daughter, continued to follow the cryptic map that led him deeper into the unknown. Every step brought him closer to the confrontation he both dreaded and longed for, the encounter with the vurdalak. His allies, a motley group of individuals who had been drawn into his quest, moved silently through the shadows. There was Andrei, a grizzled woodsman with a penchant for folklore and an unquenchable curiosity. Then there was Katerina, a woman whose past was shrouded in mystery, her reasons for joining the hunt known only to herself. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, united by a common goal, to face the darkness that had taken Elena. As they followed the trail marked by the arcane symbols, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew denser, their gnarled branches twisting like grotesque sentinels. The whispers in the wind grew louder, an eerie chorus that echoed through the night. And then, as they reached a clearing bathed in moonlight, they saw it, the vurdalak. It stood before them, a creature of pure malevolence and dread. Its eyes were pools of darkness, its skin pallid and marred by centuries of torment. It radiated an aura of ancient evil that sent shivers down their spines. The vurdalak's lips curled into a grotesque smile, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. It spoke in a voice that seemed to emanate from the very depths of hell, a voice that chilled their souls. "Welcome, Alexander Volkov," it hissed. "I've been expecting you." In that moment, the true nature of the vurdalak became horrifyingly clear. It possessed powers beyond their wildest nightmares, powers that defied the laws of nature. It moved with unnatural speed, its form blurring as it lunged at them. Andrei and Katerina fought valiantly, but their efforts were in vain. The vurdalak's strength was inexhaustible, and it seemed to feed on their fear and despair. Alexander knew that he couldn't stand idly by. With a surge of determination, he raised the vial of enchanted herbs that Isabella had given him and recited the incantation she had taught him. A burst of otherworldly energy surrounded him, forming a protective barrier that pushed back the vurdalak, causing it to howl in agony. But the vurdalak was not so easily defeated. It unleashed its own dark magic, conjuring tendrils of shadow that snaked toward Alexander, threatening to ensnare him. He fought back with every ounce of strength he possessed, his willpower the only thing standing between him and certain doom. As the battle raged on, Alexander's inner conflict became increasingly pronounced. His hope of saving Elena clashed with the harsh reality of facing an unimaginable evil. Doubt gnawed at his resolve, and he questioned whether he could truly overcome the darkness that threatened to consume him. The forest bore witness to a brutal confrontation, a battle between light and darkness, between a desperate father and an ancient malevolence. Blood was spilled, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie pallor over the scene. In the end, it was a combination of Alexander's unwavering determination, the enchanted herbs, and a stroke of luck that turned the tide of the battle. With a final incantation, Alexander shattered the vurdalak's hold on his allies, breaking the curse that had bound them. The vurdalak, wounded and enraged, retreated into the shadows, its sinister laughter echoing through the forest. It was not defeated, but it had been wounded, a fact that filled Alexander with a grim sense of hope. As the group regrouped and tended to their injuries, the weight of their ordeal settled upon them. The forest had revealed its darkest secrets, and they had glimpsed the true extent of the vurdalak's malevolence. The path ahead was treacherous and filled with uncertainty, but Alexander's determination burned brighter than ever. Elena was still out there, somewhere in the clutches of the vurdalak, and Alexander knew that he would stop at nothing to rescue her, to free her from the darkness that threatened to consume her soul. The battle was far from over, and the forest held many more secrets, but he would face them all with unwavering resolve. In the heart of the sinister forest, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, the stage was set for a final confrontation, a battle that would test the limits of human courage and the resilience of the human spirit. And Alexander Volkov, a man with an enigmatic past and an unbreakable determination, was prepared to face the darkness head-on, no matter the cost. As the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the forest, Alexander Volkov and his allies continued their relentless pursuit of the vurdalak. The previous battle had taken its toll, and they were battered, bruised, and weary. But their determination remained unshaken, fueled by a burning need to rescue Elena and put an end to the malevolent curse that had plagued their lives. Following the map inscribed with cryptic symbols, they ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, each step bringing them closer to the vurdalak's lair. The air grew colder, and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, as if the very forest itself conspired against them. Finally, they arrived at a clearing unlike any they had seen before. The moonlight bathed the area in an otherworldly radiance, revealing a grotesque tableau. In the center of the clearing stood the vurdalak, its form more grotesque and monstrous than ever. It was as if the malevolent force had grown stronger, feeding on their desperation. But what drew their attention most was Elena, standing beside the vurdalak. Her eyes, once filled with innocence, were now vacant and soulless. She had become a pawn in the vurdalak's sinister game, a living vessel for the darkness that had consumed her. Alexander's heart sank as he realized the true nature of the curse that had befallen his daughter. She was no longer the child he had known and loved. She had been transformed into a vessel for the vurdalak's insidious power, a fate worse than death. The vurdalak, its malevolent eyes fixed on Alexander, spoke with a voice that sent shivers down their spines. "You see, Alexander Volkov, your daughter is no longer your own. She is mine, bound to me for all eternity." With a flick of its twisted hand, the vurdalak sent tendrils of shadow surging toward them. Alexander and his allies fought with all their might, their very souls at stake. But the vurdalak's power was overwhelming, and it seemed as though all hope was lost. In the midst of the battle, a realization struck Alexander, a terrible truth that had eluded him until now. The curse that bound Elena to the vurdalak was unbreakable. To destroy the vurdalak meant to condemn his daughter to a fate worse than death, an eternity of darkness and torment. The weight of this revelation bore down on Alexander, threatening to crush his spirit. He was faced with an impossible choice: save his daughter, and let the vurdalak continue its reign of terror, or destroy the vurdalak and doom Elena to an eternity of darkness. As the battle raged on, Alexander's inner turmoil reached its breaking point. He couldn't bear to see his daughter in such a wretched state, yet he knew that the vurdalak had to be stopped. The forest seemed to close in around them, the very trees bearing witness to the excruciating choice he had to make. With a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, Alexander raised the vial of enchanted herbs once more. He recited the incantation, summoning all the power he could muster, and directed it toward the vurdalak. The creature howled in agony as the magic enveloped it, its form contorting and writhing. In that moment, the forest itself seemed to rebel against the darkness. The trees shook, their branches thrashing as if trying to break free from the malevolent presence that had plagued them for centuries. The vurdalak's grip on Elena weakened, and her vacant eyes began to regain a glimmer of humanity. But the cost was high. As the vurdalak's form disintegrated into shadows, it uttered a curse that reverberated through the clearing. "You may have defeated me, Alexander Volkov, but the price of your victory is a heavy one. Your soul is forever tainted by the darkness you sought to destroy." As the vurdalak's curse took hold, Alexander felt a searing pain in his chest, as if his very soul was being ripped asunder. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony, his vision blurred with tears. Elena, now free from the vurdalak's influence, rushed to her father's side, her tears mingling with his. She had been saved, but at a terrible cost. The forest, once a place of dread and malevolence, seemed to sigh in relief. The curse of the vurdalak had been broken, but the scars it had left behind would linger for a lifetime. As Alexander and Elena clung to each other in the aftermath of the battle, the weight of their shared ordeal settled upon them. The forest held its secrets, and the darkness had been vanquished, but at a tremendous price. In the end, The battle against the vurdalak had been won, but the true cost of victory was immeasurable. The forest, forever changed by the events that had transpired, stood as a testament to the enduring power of darkness and the sacrifices made in the name of love and family. Alexander Volkov, a man with an enigmatic past, bore the scars of his ordeal, a constant reminder of the terrible choices he had been forced to make. And as they left the sinister forest behind, Alexander and Elena knew that they would carry the weight of their shared experience with them always, a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of love in the face of unspeakable darkness.